If you haven't already, go ahead and open up your week 4 notes. I'm going to preview those with you. So in other words, your week 4 handout. So yesterday we worked on this handout by adding semester goals and a goal for your next speech. And then here's where you'll write your reflection paragraph on your speech. And if you haven't gotten that introduction speech in yet, do so soon. We also went over letter to a future speech student. Here's where you put the answers for that. So task 3 is where we are today. So I would really suggest open that up on your iPad, because that way when I'm going over these performing concepts, you can add your answers as we go. No need to give you extra work outside of class when we have time together. So for example, the first concept I'll teach you is poise. Notice the definition has been given to you. So it's using body language or posture to show confidence and credibility. And so what I'm asking is, what are the 4 tools? You can just jot those down. Up to you if you write the details of what those 4 tools are for. And then you'll write 1 tip or idea for poise. This prompt of write 1 tip or idea is repeated throughout because I would rather you write down what you think is most significant or most important rather than having you write every single thing I tell you. All right, hopefully that is clear. If not, you know I'm in the G Meet at the end of class. Okay, so actually I'm going to show you these notes from Schoology itself because it seems to be more clear and the slides tend to get cut off if they aren't in Notability. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so we can see everything. Okay, so PVLEGS, like I've said, are performing terms, and we use these throughout the semester. And the reason why we use the same terms throughout the semester is so that we have common language to talk about what's happening in speech, and so you know what kinds of things I'm looking for as far as performing. Otherwise, it just sounds kind of vague, like, oh, your performance was good. What was good about it? This gives us specific language for speech on what was good. So the first one, as you can see, is poise, using your body and your confidence to back up your speech. Some tools of this, at least when we're in class together, is a pointer. If you ever perform in class and you want a pointer, you absolutely can use the ones that I have in there. Another tip I have for a pointer is if you're using an extendable one, the extendable metal ones, and I believe there's one on the Podium if you want to look at it later, don't hit the screen with it. That can scratch the screen, and also it's very disorientating for people. So that's one tip on a pointer. Now, of course, I'm breaking the rule for slides because I have to use these slides to teach people in class and distance, so the slides have dual purpose. But typically, if you're using slides, the second tool of Poise, don't talk at the screen. Have prompts up there that back up what you're saying that you can reference, but don't have it word for word. It's a really good idea if you're presenting a speech to have the basic outline up there, like I said, in short words, because that'll help prompt you and help to keep the audience focused. Okay, the Podium, third tool of Poise. Podium up front. So if you perform in class, this counts. One tip is don't grip it for dear life. Every so often I'll get a student who's gripping it so hard that we can see the whites of their knuckles. You are not confined to a podium when you speak. In fact, I would suggest use the entire front space if you're performing in class. Moving a little bit helps you beat off those nerves. It helps you like move out the nerves rather than trying to lock in one place. A lot of times when students try to lock into one place, I'll see their knee kind of move a little bit because it's tough to stay in exactly the same posture the entire time. I would suggest move. So that's Podium. The final tool of Poise is your mind. So I mentioned this earlier, a great way to practice is to visualize. That's true when you're presenting as well. So keep telling yourself you can present the information well is your fourth tool of Poise, your mind. So we've already talked a little bit about what happens when there's eyes on you. So some things to counter that fight versus flight response as far as poise goes. Like I said, move around the room. Think of your nervous energy as performing excitement and use it. I've been teaching since 2004. Every year, the night before the first day of school, nervous wreck. And every teacher I know is like this. We all get nervous about coming back to school and having to perform again. So most performers I know are like this. They still have that nervous energy. It doesn't really go away fully. You just learn how to use it. And the best way to use it is to think of it as performing excitement. My body is gearing me up to get ready to slay this thing. Another thing that works well to help with your nerves and possibly nerves of the audience, use visuals or stories as much as you can in telling and giving speeches. Humans are very visual and we're very tuned into the rhythms of storytelling. So both of those things work great for you as far as like getting rid of nerves because it helps you engage with people in a different way and it helps the audience connect to what you're saying. Another tip for poise is stretch. A lot of times lactic acid will build up in our muscles when we're nervous, and you don't want that. It's not a good thing to have. Water, of course, is the main element we're made of, so that's very useful when you're speaking. I would suggest, though, water in little sips before you speak so you don't do that down the wrong throat accidental thing. I've seen that a couple times. Deep breathing, of course, another good one for poise. And then finally, I want you to know as far as poise goes, and I see this all the time, audiences tend to miss a mistake if you don't stop and apologize or correct it. So typically, if you've made a mistake, keep going. You can always circle back to it, or you can say, pardon me, I meant to say, and I actually did this in class once, I meant to say oxytocin, not oxycontin. So if you feel you need to correct it, please do, but don't stop and say sorry if you make a mistake. Odds are the audience didn't really notice it. Okay, the second part of PVLEGS is voice. So here's some common issues and solutions for voice. So first off, projection is how far your voice travels. One common problem with that, too quiet. I don't usually have students that are too loud when they start out. It's usually too quiet. So some solutions for that. Visualize your voice hitting the back of the room. That includes if you're performing on film, or imagine your voice filling the entire room. And if you can't visualize that, you got to get louder. Of course, practice more. That's going to be a tip for just about all of these. Practicing helps a lot. Speak from your diaphragm. And if you're in choir, you know this, instead of from up here. So speak from down here instead of nasally up here. One way to tell if you're loud enough, if you're performing live, is people's faces. When people can't hear you, they usually squint and lean in. So they do one of these. So that's if they can't hear you or they don't understand you. Second issue with voice and some solutions for it is articulation. And in order to say it, you have to do it. So articulation is how clearly you pronounce a word or the words. So one problem with articulation is people mumbling, or they trail off a bit at the end of their sentences so you can't catch everything. Or even if they're too fast, articulation can be a problem. So one thing that helps, open your mouth more when you speak and make sure your head is up. And of course, practice more. And if you don't know how to pronounce a word, you got two options. And this will definitely be the case in informative speeches if you talk about anything medical. Either look up the word to make sure you can pronounce it. Google has just about every word with the little speaker symbol. So you can click on that and hear it. That's why I'm doing this. Right? Or you can decide this is how I'm pronouncing it the whole way through and keep on going. Both ways work pretty well. Of course, I would say look it up. And then the final issue with voice is shaky or cracking voice. And this happens to a lot of us during puberty. And then it happens again when we're nervous, because when we get stressed, vocal cords are muscled just like the rest of them when you go through fight or flight. So they tighten up, and that causes the shaking or cracking voice. Some of us, this takes a while to get rid of. Don't be frustrated with yourself if it takes you a couple speeches to shake shaky voice. So tips to fix this. Again, speaking from the diaphragm, practicing, For some folks, it helps to warm up their instrument. So they chew gum or they use a cough drop before their speech. Just make sure you spit it out before. And then warm up your vocal cords before you're speaking by talking, or you can even do choir warm up. So if you've ever done those scales, you can do that. I find talking works just fine. Okay, the next part of PVLEGS, the next performing term is life. And this is so important. It's your energy, your personality, the warmth that comes through you to the screen and to the speakers, if you will. This involves a thing called persona, which for some folks is a little tricky because they think it's fake. But what happens with persona is where you take on basically a performing personality that's best for the setting. A lot of famous performers do this. Give you an example. So Chris Farley, a lot of times comedians actually, Chris Farley and Will Ferrell, both in their private lives, known to be kind of quiet, kind of shy, not the persona they put out when they're public speaking or acting. So that's persona. Most people do this daily, subconsciously. We switch how we are for different situations. This is also known as code switching. It works best if it's close to your actual personality, but most of us do this a little bit. Think about it. How you may talk to someone at church is to like an elder at church, very different than how you might talk to a friend in the hallway, I would hope. All right. Another thing that helps well for life. So the first thing is find a persona that works for you. Another thing that works well for adding life to your speeches is pick stuff you care about to talk about. For every single speech, you will get to pick your own topic. I'll give you the speech type and I'll give you the parameters, but you get to pick what it's about. Some students will tailor make every speech to be about the same subject. That's absolutely fine. So, for example, if you're really into fixing cars, every one of your speeches could be about that. A little bit of tweaking, and I'll show you how. So, usually, if you're bored, you're boring. So, find what's interesting in the topic and don't be afraid to share it with nerdy enthusiasm. People really respond to enthusiasm. Also, the audience tends to take their cues from the speaker. So, if you're not pumped about what you're talking about, how can your audience get pumped? Last thing I'll say about life, think about it. The best teachers you've had throughout your school career are the ones who really care about their subject, who are really into it. The ones who seem like they don't, it's just not as engaging. Okay, the E in PVLEGS is for eye contact. So there's a couple tricks for this and a couple tips, I should say. One thing that helps if eyes really trigger your fight or flight, no worries. One trick you can try, and you can try this with people near you if you'd like, is look right here, either toward the bridge of their nose or the middle of the forehead, anywhere in here, and it looks like you're making eye contact with the person, but you're not. It's absolutely okay if when you're performing in class, you just kind of scan everybody real quick. When you are doing film speeches, your eye contact is looking at the camera. So one thing with eye contact is know where you shouldn't look, and that's at people who distract you. But don't look, this may sound weird, but if you got friends like mine who like to get you to crack up a bit, don't look at your friends because they'll make a face and then it's over. You'll start laughing. Yes, that'll be good for your nerves, but don't look at people who distract you. Eye contact also depends on culture and situation. Not every culture thinks that making eye contact is a sign of respect. In fact, in some, it's the opposite. So eye contact and how much, all about where you're at, culture of the situation. Another tip, if you're performing in person, balance where you're looking. So don't just talk to the teacher. I have some kids when I would be in class who would do that. They give their whole speech while staring at me. It was a little creepy. So try to be natural. Like I said, try to kind of scan the room. You also will sometimes see people who are clearly trying to remember to do eye contact and they'll do a sprinkler pattern. That ends up being kind of distracting. Here's what that looks like. That's where you're like, so my life is an interesting one. I don't even know what to, and then back. So try to avoid that. most of us tend to miss the side that's on our dominant hand, eye contact wise. So for me, that's my right. So your writing hand is really the side you're going to have to consciously make sure you look to. Okay, so the G of PVLEGS is gestures. And these are great. They help with poise, visuals, and they give you a place to put that nervous energy. If you're struggling with, eyes on you, flight versus fight, gestures can help with that. So you can use gestures to emphasize a point, to add life or build persona, point out part of a visual. That's a great way to get a gesture in. If you have one required for a speech, point out something specific on the visual. So for example, if I were to point out, Kristen Stewart is my example of good gestures because whenever she has an interview, those hands are moving and they're moving in a way that keeps you focused on what she's saying, not just random, here's a gesture. If you are telling a story, a lot of times your gestures will be mimicking the other person. So how they move is how you move. And just like with eye contact, gestures are absolutely culture specific. For example, this in America is V for victory or peace. Typically, the V for victory is old. In England, this is flipping someone off. And it's a very long story, but doing this is flipping someone off in England, which I didn't know. I used to be married to a British person for a decade. I did not know that that was the case. So one of the first times I met his mother, at one point, something happened in conversation. I went, yeah, peace. And she was like, ugh. And I did not know why she was horrified. That was why. All right. And then the final PVLEGS term is speed, also known as pace. So a couple tips for this. Build in pauses when you write your speech. And by that, I mean literally write pause in all caps when you're writing it, because that way you know you have them in there. You've consciously added them. So you're not going too fast. It depends on your audience what pace is right. You want to be making sure you go slow enough so people catch everything, but not so slow that they want to hurt themselves. So if you've ever seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ben Stein's character is a teacher who talks in such a slow speed, and it drives everybody nuts. He just, Bueller, Bueller. You want to avoid that. So find that sweet spot. One thing that helps with this is before you even perform, practice with your stopwatch app on your phone. Odds are very good that when you're in front of people or on performance day, filming or in person, you're going to go a little bit faster. That's normal. So if you've timed out your speech in practice at 2 minutes on the dot and your speech has to be 2 minutes, I would add a little bit more just to make sure you've covered the fact you'll probably speak a little bit faster on the day of. A great way to check your speed if you're performing in person is people's faces. I've been teaching a long time. And so this is the pattern. This is what I've seen for people's faces. I used to teach ninth graders. Their faces are always showing what they think. So if you're going too fast, people will make this kind of face. They will widen their eyes. They will pull their body and their face back as if your words are going so fast they are hitting them. Sometimes they'll do this, like they're fascinated. Like, what is this creature who is speaking so quickly? They also will, a lot of times, kind of blink if you're going, like they blink quicker if you're going too fast. So the whole thing looks like this. Too fast is that. Too slow is the opposite. They'll either droop their eyes or it always involves tilting down. They'll droop their eyes, or in the case of ninth graders, they'll glare at you like you stole their lunch. Like they just kind of. A lot of times, if you're going too slow, people will do this whole face, and this is from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This is this gentleman's response to Ben Stein going very slow. So the too slow face is this. Like I said, sometimes it looks like pure hate. This video you don't have to watch because I've included it in your extra resources. You can if you want to, but it's not required. He gives some really good tips on how to do gestures and how to poise yourself before you speak. So that's PVLEGS. So at this point, you should have, if you've gotten everything done, of course. So at this point, you should have all the answers for your week 4 work. Like I said, if you have not done your informative speech yet, I would ask if you can go out into the hall quick and film it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. So you have the rest of the time to work. As per usual, I'll be in the meet if anyone needs anything.